2 weeks after elections, and we're plotting a way forward as to what then happens to a South Africa. What would a government look like? What could a cabinet look like? And what could this mean for 62 million South Africans? Plotting a way forward is also it's something that's quite new and novel, particularly in the space of our body politic at the moment. But it is not unfamiliar for South Africa to be plotting a way forward when it comes to what a future could look like. There are options that have been crafted decades ago as South Africa entered into a fledgling democracy. Former public protector, Professor Advocate Thuli Madonsela recently penned a piece reminding us of the Monler scenarios and how South Africa can choose a positive path to either soar like flamingos or keep our head in the sand like ostriches. In the Sunday Times, she writes that as South Africa tries to find a new path after these watershed elections, we need to embrace the kind of inclusive economy that was promoted by the Monler scenarios. Professor Thuli Madonsela joins me now. Talk to me about that period, 1992, after the unbanning of the ANC and the PAC, with elections being planned. What were some of the scenarios that were sketched for a future South Africa after the first democratic elections in 1994? Professor, good morning.
Good morning, Lester, and good morning to the listeners. The group that gathered, which was some business people and professionals and activists, came out with 4 scenarios, and you really have sketched them out. One was the lame duck, which is indecision, and you're just really not sure where you're going, and at the end of the day, things fall apart. Icarus was if we chose socialism and rapidly, radically transformed everything, and then, of course, got a backlash and ended up poor. Ostrich was if there was no transformation, if, for example, the National Party won and there was no transformation to redress what happened under apartheid, and they pretended that the troubles of grievances would just go away, as people normally do when they plonk their head in the sand like an ostrich. The preferred scenario, or desirable one, was the flight of the Flamingos, where there wasn't a choice between business interests or retaining the status quo or rapidly transforming. The idea was growth and redistribution happening concurrently. And when I was in government in the early 90s, that was generally what Nelson Mandela had in mind. They used to speak about meeting basic needs and becoming globally competitive. So it was that dual carriage path until, sadly, from 1999 onwards, a choice sort of was made to listen to the markets, and even then to go for the so-called trickle-down approach, which was, yes, inclusion, but selective inclusion, more assimilationist inclusion. And then here we are. Nelson Mandela himself led the creation of the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, and pushed us to finalize it just before he left, which we finalized it around 1999, and President Beki took it forth, and it was passed into law in February 2000. Thirdly, it remains unimplemented because those businesses that had access to treasury and access to the presidencies of the time then just made it impossible for Chapter 5 to be implemented, which was redressing the imbalances of the past in all aspects of life so that we could rise together and fly together like Flamingos.
You've argued, Professor, that forming a government merely for the stability of the market or to appease the market and the stability of the economy is not necessarily in the best interests of the majority of vulnerable South Africans. I read out your tweet to Rise Mzansi's Songezo Zibi last week, where he says he largely disagrees with you, saying, and largely based on that trickle down principle, that we need a stable economy to grow jobs within the private sector so that we can see a boosting of the lot of the most vulnerable South Africans. You are saying that we cannot just make negotiation, coalition agreements merely to satisfy the market or the economy. It has to be inclusive. Explain.
Well, certainly. I've been misunderstood to be saying ignore the markets, and that's not my message. My message is society is a system, and in a system there are various factors that keep the system together. And if you want to improve the system, you have to intervene in several factors, and you have to consider a balanced approach. Hence my invoking the flight of the flamingos scenario. I'm shocked that Songezo is saying that because their manifesto seems to be suggesting a mixed bag. But anyway, if you consider the markets only, the markets are often unpredictable. For example, during COVID, we had done nothing wrong. We were all on our knees because this tragedy had befallen on us. But a lot of banks in South Africa were suggesting that their customers, in fact, inviting and encouraging their customers to invest offshore. So you can't always rely on business because often they are transactional. They are pushed by their shareholders to make profit now, unless they belong to this new business thinking, which is people, profit, planet, in that order. So, no, people, planet, profit, in that order. Therefore, you can't just look at businesses because some just want money now, and they've got this understanding that, okay, if it doesn't work here, they can always go somewhere else and make that money, not understanding that the world is one ecosystem. If you mess up in one part of the ecosystem, that damage will eventually follow you wherever you are. So the idea is, yes, do consider markets, but invest in humans because that's sustainable. I mean, the Rwandan strategic plan ends, I think it starts with the saying that if you want to be prosperous for a year, invest in crops. If you want to be prosperous for 10 years or more, invest in trees. If you want to be prosperous for 100 years and beyond, invest in people. Lastly, the Constitution says we must build a society. It has never said we should build an economy. And the idea is we should build a society and then look at the economy as one of the vehicles to make the society of our dreams possible.
Your thoughts on these political parties who appear to have these irretractable positions and non-negotiables. The Democratic Alliances and campaigned on a doomsday coalition of the ANC and the EFF. The EFF now says it will not be part of any form of possible GNU if the Democratic Alliance is involved. There is still some within the ANC itself who says that forming some form of partnership with the Democratic Alliance is still considered this mortal sin. We seem to have these irretractable ideological positions that if we can get beyond that, we work towards creating a more just society. Even with the MK party, they are legitimately the party that has received the fourth largest mandate from voters in this country. Your thoughts on some of these political parties with these non-negotiables and irretractable positions that says if these people are involved, then we're stepping back?
I think our political leaders, whoever they are, need to be humbled by the results of the election. Basically, the people of South Africa did not give any party an absolute mandate to govern. Most of the people chose the ANC and they gave it 60%, which gives it then the opportunity, in addition to being the current governing party, to convene the talks. But everyone else was not given a mandate. So the DA, with massive money and the MPC lot, were not given a mandate to move right, as they were suggesting. The MK party and the EFF, despite the MK party leveraging the MK brand and the fact that President Zuma is still a member of the ANC, he did not succeed in splitting the ANC in half and getting half the share. He only got 15%. EFF shared a few votes and got less than 10%. What does it say? It says the majority of people are convinced the ANC can take us forward with its new, slightly tweaked vision, but that's not the majority as in a political majority that allows it to govern. So that means the ANC and everyone else are to be humble. And what we are suggesting, at least for my part, based on what we did as TUMA and the Center for Social Justice, listening to people, is that the people want change, they want transformation, they want a faster pace of transformation. And that transformation should be based on what is already in the Constitution: land reform, an inclusive economy, social security, which includes the SRD grant, minimum wages, which is a global requirement under the ILO convention. So the things that the people want are things that are already protected in the Constitution.
Professor Thuli Madonsela, really appreciate your time.